Sorry about that. My name is and I'm currently a senior at Loyola High School. First, I want to thank you guys right here, the council department, and everyone that was involved in making this important night happen. Mental health is a huge topic that has a lot of stigma and negativity in today's society. And we see the effects of this with a lot of mental illnesses in teens, with rates of suicide skyrocketing in the last 10 years in teens, and even in our own community with the passings earlier this year. And personally for me, the biggest toll in mental health has been with my father passing away in second grade. And honestly, I saw that kind of trauma and that toll that I take on me for a long time afterwards. And the only reason that I actually really did get to recover from that was because of my peers, my friends, my counselors, and even therapists that really did support me through that. And with the support that I got from everyone around me, I truly did want to give back to the community that really did give me, kind of help me through that process. And because of this, I started volunteering for a teen crisis hotline called Teen Line. And a little bit of background on Teen Line, I'm not going to take too much time on that. Teen Line is, like I said, a teen crisis hotline. And what the gist of it is teens like me are the people that are picking up the phone when teens from the nation call to talk about anything from suicide to child abuse to depression to anxiety or any stressor that they have. And just seeing that a lot of people from across the nation are going through things like depression and anxiety, and seeing the overwhelming number of those people, it just really truly put into my mind the aspect of there's a huge population that are going through this. And so I started volunteering my time again, going to other schools, talking to faculty and staff there about teen mental health, and suicide prevention for teens. And very honestly, it felt very hypocritical of me to go to other schools while I wasn't doing the same thing at Loyola High School at my own community. And so I always had this in the back of my mind, I really do need to get involved at Loyola to talk about teen mental health and talk about the different ways to kind of cope with that, cope with stress and stuff. And the biggest aha moment a little bit for me was earlier this year in March, when we had that walkout on March 12th, I believe, when Mr. Kazakowski of the school, he asked the student body of what different things that Loyola can do to kind of make it a safer community for Loyola. And I was in my honors breakout class there, and we were talking about that. And a lot of us said that we didn't really feel like we could go to someone to talk about our mental health, our own experiences with family problems, or anything that doesn't have to do with academics to someone at Loyola. But when I did a little bit more research, like going to my counselor and asking her about, and I talked to Marva about the different resources at Loyola, I realized that there are a huge number of resources here, and that includes the career personalists, and even the counseling department that aren't here just for colleges, college application processes, but also here for our mental well-being, and even faculty and staff who truly do care about our mental well-being. Because really honestly, for me, the only reason I was a counselor or a teacher before this year was if I had a bad grade, if I got a C on my last test or anything like that, I would be like, oh my gosh, what happened? But I realized that Loyola does truly care about our mental well-being, and a lot of the students here aren't aware of that fact. And that's the reason with my friend Tunnel Lee, who's also a senior, we made the Mental Health Awareness Club. And the biggest goal of our club was to bring awareness to the fact that we do have these resources here at Loyola. And like I said, the care personalities is a huge one that we do really kind of strive for, and council departments are here for us, even if we aren't going through academic trouble, even with families, and our own friend community. And with this, I really do hope that we do move forward towards building a better and safer community out there. So yeah, thank you.
So we have an additional student testimonial from current junior Ben Boltine that will be read with his permission by his counselor, Mrs. Darryl Crowley.
My student was going to read this, and then he saw how many chairs were set up and told me, "You're reading this." So he writes, I had a couple of rough years here in terms of mental health and alcohol and drug abuse. I was struggling with anxiety and ended up self-medicating and becoming addicted. I'm here to tell you about some of the triggers, a few of the things that increase my anxiety, and a few of the things that can increase any kid's anxiety, and offer you some suggestions that might help you parents help their students navigate anxiety and these stressful times so they don't go down the same path that I did. Not that every kid who's anxious does, but some do. I was completely disorganized. My backpack and my room were a mess. I have ADD. I didn't even know where to start my work because I didn't know where anything was. So I procrastinated, which only made my anxiety worse. And often when I did complete assignments, I would lose them. My grades slipped, and that was anxiety provoking. Disorganization can be anxiety provoking. I'm not saying start barking at your kids to get organized, but maybe set an example. Help them. Offer them incentives like privileges or rewards for being organized and turning in assignments and getting work done. That being said, please don't misunderstand my recommendation of helping your student get organized for encouraging hovering. Parental hovering can be anxiety provoking. Let them learn from their mistakes. Sure, help them if they ask for help, but being micromanaged can be anxiety provoking. Maybe help your students make lists of what needs to be done, and then leave it to your kid to get the items on the list done, or not. If he doesn't get them done, that's on him. The pressure to be popular or cool can be a trigger for anxiety. This has been around forever. Think of the movie Breakfast Club from the 80s. Pressure to fit in, find a group, is still there, but it's amplified now because of social media. We are constantly being bombarded with images of our peers being cool, belonging, doing cool things on Instagram. It's a lot. It can be isolating, and it can be anxiety provoking. What can you do? Set an example. Turn off your phones. Make family time just that, family time. No phones on. Do things where phones just aren't an option. Hiking, seeing a movie. Please talk to your kids about Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. They all just capture moments in time, moments of being cool, moments of belonging, moments of doing cool things. But they're just that, moments. Putting too much stock in them can trigger anxiety. There are other pressures to fit in. We're teenagers. That's natural. It's been the case forever. But not fitting in can make a kid feel really anxious. It really helps when parents focus on what we're doing right and what you like about us. So instead of harping on what we do wrong, you missed another assignment, your grades are bad, your grades aren't good enough. Focus on what we do right. Focus on what we like about us. Not feeling good about ourselves can make us feel even more anxious. Please tell us what you like about us. It's really competitive in high school and school nowadays. Athletics, academics, leadership, getting into college are all really competitive. Way more competitive than when we were going through high school. And it's extremely anxiety provoking. That competition can make the competitive nature of that competition can make a kid really anxious. You parents can't change the competitive nature of high school or college admissions, but you can manage your expectations so we can set ours. Don't expect us to have perfect grades, or to get the star role in every play, or be the star of every sport, or the leader of every club, or that your kid is getting into a top-tier school, even if he is a good student. Just expect and encourage your student to give his best, because that's the best he can do. And get excited about his accomplishments, no matter how big or how small. There's a lot of pressure for us to hide our feelings, to act tough, to pretend that all these pressures aren't getting to us when we're high school students. Holding on to those anxious feelings can really make a kid anxious. I know it can be really hard to talk to us, but when we do talk, please really listen. Really hear us. If your kid tells you that he's feeling overwhelmed, pushing your kid to take another AP might not be such a good idea. If your kid is acting up, find out why. If you can't talk to him, but you know something is going on, get help so that you guys can talk to each other. I am really, really lucky. I have great parents. They weren't the ones who were pulling all those triggers of anxiety I mentioned. I was talking about some of the triggers for anxiety that I felt, and some of the triggers that I know my friends feel. I will tell you 3 things that my parents did that they did really well. They got me help when I needed it. They have loved and supported me every minute of every day. And they sent me to Loyola, where I got more support than I ever would have imagined. And that is one of the reasons I have been sober for 199 days.
So my name is Dr. Paul Jordan. I'm an assistant principal for Student Life here. I'm grateful for your attendance here this evening. We thought it important to contextualize this evening with those opening student perspectives and remarks. The goal of this night is to let you know that we are keenly aware of the challenges both you and your sons are facing with regards not only to alcohol and drug use, but also the emerging phenomenon of mental health issues within our community. Unfortunately, our community has experienced the loss of 2 of its members within the past year. Mr. Michael Liu, a longtime and beloved faculty member, took his life in the spring of this year after battling mental health issues for a number of years. Additionally, one of our graduated seniors died from an accidental drug and alcohol overdose just 2 weeks after graduation happened in June. These tragic deaths have caused us to examine our practices with regards to how we can best support members of the Loyola community who are battling these diseases. Our mission demands that we constantly look for ways to best support our students. The Latin term, cura personalis, defined literally as the care of the whole person, is what guides our vocation each day here at Loyola. Cura personalis is why you entrusted your sons to us. Speaking specifically to the area of mental health, we have seen a more frequent occurrence of students experiencing mental health and anxiety issues. The stress that they are feeling from numerous areas, academic performance, athletic performance, social pressure, parental expectations, among others, that are causing some students, not all students, but some students, to reach levels of anxiety and depression that require professional assistance. Loyola is not alone when it comes to this phenomenon. As a parent of 4 teenage daughters, I hear and witness these same struggles in the world outside of Loyola. Our peer schools share that they are challenged too to support their students who are struggling. We have met with a number of colleges who tell us that above all problems that they are dealing with, including drug and alcohol usage, mental health is the most prominent today. No matter what level of mental health, we want our community to work together. Parents, students, counselors, administrators, faculty, coaches, all of us need to meet our students where they are and put our arms around them collectively. You're going to hear from Dean Anarelli at the end of our program tonight the explicit ways that Loyola is offering support to you and to your sons both in a proactive and reactive manner. We want to be your partner throughout this time when your sons will be challenged both by personal and social pressures. Prior to Mr. Anarelli, our program is filled with various experts in the fields of drug and alcohol behaviors, psychology, treatment programs, and a testimony from a parent of 4 alumni. So our next speaker is Mr. Will Strawn from FCD. FCD Prevention Works is part of the Hazelton Betty Ford Foundation. FCD stands for Freedom from Chemical Dependency and is the leading international nonprofit provider of school-based substance abuse prevention services. For decades, FCD has worked worldwide to provide students and the adults who care for them with the knowledge and understanding and skills they need to make intelligent, healthy choices about alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use. All the presenters from FCD are recovering addicts who share their lived experiences with our students. FCD has been partnering with Loyola for 19 years and educating our students on drug and alcohol prevention from the health perspective. Mr. Will Strawn.
Thanks a lot. How you doing? Good evening. Raise your hand if you have a 9th or a 12th grader here. Cool. You can give yourself a pat on the back. They've been fantastic. So, my colleague Morgan Jones and I have been working with the 9th and 12th graders this week. Next month, there'll be more prevention specialists coming. From where in the world they will be coming, I do not know, but they'll be working with the rest of the students. So, I just wanted to say that while Dan gets the PowerPoint queued up. My name is Will Strawn, and I am in my 5th year as a prevention specialist for FCD. As Paul pointed out, I am in long-term healthy recovery from addiction, the disease of addiction, the brain disease of drug addiction. Some similarities I may have to some of you or some of your sons. I went to an all-boys school on the East Coast. I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. I went to a private boarding school with Episcopalian roots in Virginia, and I did really well there. And I was sharing with the boys throughout this week that my life looked pretty darn good 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, especially 11th and 12th grade. I was on course because of the work my dad and my family did to give me the opportunity to have an education like I did. I was on track, even early decision, into the college that I wanted to go to succeed in life. And because of lack of information, because of some burgeoning mental health struggles with depression and attention deficit disorder, both of which were undiagnosed, I ended up progressing to addiction to marijuana first semester sophomore year and had to withdraw from the college I went to. I did graduate from college in 4 years, but it took me 4 different universities. And so one of the things we share with the boys, they sometimes want to know if we got arrested or what happened to us in rehab, if we did go to rehab. And we will share those experiences with them, but we also back it up to where they are now, because the goal with prevention is education, providing them the information they need, providing you the information you need, and then being able to notice those signs early. So whether it's mental health or whether it's substance use, how can I tell if my son, how can I tell if my friend might have a problem? And based on a survey, and Loyola has taken the FCD Student Attitudes and Behavior Survey several times now. Based on this particular survey that was last administered a couple of years ago, 40% of boys said that they think they might have a friend who has a problem with substance use. And so one of the things we help them with this week is how to help a friend. What is some of the language that you can find? So I'll go ahead and go through this. If you don't leave with anything, I think what I found in my work around the world, and by the way, I have my passport right here in my pocket because I'm going to San Jose tonight to work with the school there for a day, and then in Phoenix for a week, and then in Taiwan for 2 weeks, and then to Nashville after that. So we do scoot around the world, and I have my passport, and that's awesome. That gets me into the different countries, but what allows us to work with these communities all around the world, the American School of Taipei, the European School of Taipei, all across places where laws are different, death penalty for possession of marijuana in some countries, legalized here in California for recreational purposes. What allows us to do that, we also have a passport that says we come from a health perspective. And so rather than coming in and judging what anybody's laws are or what a family allows their child or doesn't allow their child to do, we come from a health perspective which basically shows that younger people are more at risk from negative consequences to alcohol and other substance use when they're younger. The benefits of delayed use, letting that brain develop, are now known. And so this is the perspective that we come from. So one of the things that we work with students and faculty, but I think for parents, they always say, thank you for helping me build new language around substance use for my child, so that I stop saying good and bad and stupid decisions and things like that, and I talk about healthy and unhealthy. So what's healthy, what's unhealthy, what's higher risk? I'm your mom. I did make some choices when I was younger. I'm your dad, I did make some choices when I was younger, and I do regret that. I got really lucky. I'm here today and I feel really fortunate about that, but can I tell you something? Because they're asking me, can I please drink? Or when is an appropriate time to drink? And you can say to them, we used to smoke on airplanes. We used to be able to go buy tobacco at an earlier age. We know a lot more now, and we know a lot more about alcohol. It's not a bad drug. It's just more risky, it's more harmful for a younger person. So this is the language that we hope you can kind of build into your conversations with your kids. So again, with the ninth graders, they were really curious, really respectful. I could hardly get through the curriculum, our high school curriculum, because they had so many questions. They showed a really high awareness of the risks of substance use, but they were pretty honest. I was like, how much do you guys know about alcohol? And they were like, not that much. Totally honest about it. What's beautiful about scheduling that education early on in the year is we have ninth graders coming from one middle school? No, like 100 middle schools, right? Or maybe more, from hundreds of counties around here. And now all of them get to sit around the room and hear the same information. The school provides this opportunity for small group sessions multiple times for them to hear each other talk about their healthy choices, the things that they do, how to help a friend. So it's a really wonderful environment to do that in. Seniors, they were the exact opposite because they thought they knew everything. But what was wonderful about our sessions with the seniors today is they had some questions that were a little bit, at first, like, what makes you guys the experts on this? Well, we share with them that we're in recovery from addiction. And then they're literally halfway through our conversations with them, and they are typically discussions in a high school, so our discussions with them, the gravity on their faces, they're showing a healthy awareness as well. I asked students, have you ever seen a friend, or do you know somebody, maybe it's a family member, who might be addicted to nicotine or potentially marijuana or another substance? And we gauged that 60 to 70% of the hands went up in the room. So even though they may be risky, some may be making risky choices, not all of them, they do show a healthy awareness of concern, and we talked about how they might be able to help a friend. They are stressed. This is one of the first times in their lives where they've had to sort of throw the ball pretty far down the field. I'm applying to school, deadlines tonight for early applications if they're applying early, but they're having to look way down the road and deal with today and deal with the pressures. And most of them put the pressure on themselves, but they do get pressure from parents as well, because guess what? You all are doing a wonderful job, but they do not want to let you down. That is the main reason why they say they make the choices that they do, that I don't want my parents to get upset. So we talked about with the ninth graders, the 12th graders have had this education for 4 years, this is their 4th year, so we didn't cover the basics as much with them, except for a little bit of a reminder. When I say the basics, we talk about risk factors of family history, age of first use, surroundings. Family history plays a significant role. I'm a male son. I have a father and a grandfather who are also addicted, and I had a 20 to 50% risk of becoming addicted because of that. So addiction happens to run very prominently through male family lines. Is this a sentence? No. It's not a sentence for addiction, but it does put someone at higher risk, and it's good information to know. They probably know if they have cancer, heart disease, or diabetes in the family. We want to also open up that conversation because addiction is not a moral problem. It's a health issue. Another interesting thing, if we're talking about mental health, recent studies show that there are 300 genes that correspond to addiction, to somebody having a chance of developing addiction, and they're the same genes, same genetic factors that overlap with mood and behavioral regulatory problems. So there is a relationship there. It's not that somebody's depression makes them want to run out and start vaping nicotine from a Juul or inhaling marijuana. It's not that somebody starts inhaling, like smoking weed or drinking alcohol, and then they develop a problem, although both of those can happen. But typically what it is, both of those coexist at the same time. One of the risks that we do see is that if you ask a ninth grader when do adults drink, they'll say, well, when they get stressed. And so they start associating substance use. What is weed good for? And they'll say, stress. Say, why do people smoke cigarettes? To relieve stress. So they start making these particular connections, and unfortunately, those drugs actually do work. And for a younger person whose brain is still developing, when a young person inhales on a vaporizer that vaporizes nicotine, it can make them feel pretty good. It relieves stress. It teaches the brain to learn that habit very quickly. It takes about 7 to 10 days for an adolescent to start becoming tolerant and dependent on nicotine. So I'll talk about that in just a little bit. Age of first use. The largest studies that have been done with regards to alcohol use show that a person who engages in alcohol use before the age of 15 is 4 times more likely to become addicted. So about 40% of people in this study who engaged in alcohol use, reported use before the age of 15, a full drink, ended up later developing an addiction to alcohol. Guess what happened if they waited until they were 18? Less than 25%. What happens if they wait till their prefrontal cortex is a little more developed and their personality is a little bit more filled in? Less than 10% became addicted. Not everybody who drinks, some of us in this room who drank as a high school student became addicted, or a middle school student. It just invites more risk. I always tell the boys, like, if they like baseball, it's like you step into the on-deck circle and you're in a little bit more risk if you engage in use when you're younger. So if you are a parent, like most of you who are looking for reasons, how can I help them push this decision back? By the way, not all kids want to drink, so let's not always assume that. How can I help them push this decision back? The benefits of delayed use are known, so that's something that we want to encourage. Why do kids use alcohol? This is what they tell us consistently, and I did include a little bit of data from the Student Attitudes and Behavior Survey that y'all took last year, that the boys took a couple of years ago. Stress, when do parents drink? Why do people use drugs? It's to relieve stress, is what they commonly say. Loyola students feel significant pressure from academics, 90%, parents, 65%. Good, you guys are a little bit lower. But don't you think it's kind of sweet that 89% of them, like, it's their own stress? And that's a lot of that is they don't want to let you down. They feel so proud to have the opportunity to be at this school, and they're not going to act like that. You're gonna say things to them, and they're going to turn. This one woman recently said, every time I talk to my son in the car about drugs, he just starts turning towards the passenger door. and she said, I know he's not listening to me. Yes, he is. Even college students report back that they are more likely to make healthy choices if their parents keep talking to them about substance use throughout their high school years and on into college. This doesn't mean they might not be using it, but they do tend to make more measured choices. So that's really important to keep in mind. Ladies and gentlemen, this is really important to keep in mind. I know we all have our perceptions about this. 20 years ago, in 1998, the majority of 10th graders reported that they had had a drink of alcohol in their entire life. Has that number gone up or down? Yeah, by 30%. It's dropped 30%. So the majority of 10th graders in the United States have not had a full dose of alcohol in their lives. That's the same survey with the same questions, measuring the same schools in all 50 states, public and private high schools. That's really good news, right? And it's not, again, that alcohol is bad, it's that kids are getting more accurate information about it. Marijuana use has actually not gone up. It's leveled off for the last 5 or 6 years. It was actually higher about 20 years ago. So important information to keep in mind. Everybody is not doing it, but kids do feel stressed to fit in. This week, I asked them, why do some kids decide that even though they know it's unhealthy to vape, use a Juul? Do you guys know what a Juul is? An electronic cigarette. I mean, it's created right up the road from here in Stanford, not too close, but in California. Sometimes they'll just say, sometimes I'll go somewhere and my friends are doing it, I don't even want to do it, but I just pick it up to fit in. And we have to realize when you're young, the desire to fit in, it's a biological imperative. So the amygdala, the limbic system, hate not fitting in. If a kid doesn't get accepted on the team or gets rejected from a significant other, that feels like the end of the world because their brain assumes it is the end of the world. We have to help them realize that not everybody is doing it and you do fit in, and we want to help you as your parents actually come up with some other ways for you to fit in and feel good. So helping our kids be creative with different ways to feel good about the choices they're making is really important. Again, USA, student use of alcohol and illicit drugs other than marijuana and inhalants are at their lowest points. High school kids are not using more inhalants. That was something that showed up in middle school, and marijuana, like I said, is leveled off. So this is important information. Okay, Juul, really quickly. I had something eerie happen to me 2 years ago. I was walking through the airport, and on a Newsweek cover, you guys remember the Marlboro Man? If you're from another country or aren't familiar with the way tobacco's been marketed in the United States, when I was growing up, I'm 45, the Marlboro Man was on TV and advertising cigarettes, and I actually did want to be a cowboy. I was a cowboy. And I rolled my own cigarettes and everything. And on the cover of Newsweek was the Marlboro Man, and he had like I thought it was a cigarette, it was an electronic cigarette in his hand. And you know what the title of that, I don't know if anyone ever saw that, it said "Big Tobacco is Back." Ladies and gentlemen, tobacco use is still the leading preventable cause of death in our country. Its use is very low, it's gone down quite a bit. And now we have this. And we know that 90% of people who get addicted to nicotine started at 18 or before. So if the electronic cigarette companies don't get our kids hooked, they're not going to have customers. So we know that they're marketing towards them no matter what they say. These can be a way for an addicted cigarette smoker to get off of, at least get away from the tar in cigarettes. That's wonderful. And kids think that's a noble cause. But that makes them, mango and creme brulee are not marketed towards their parents. So this is important information to keep in mind. Nicotine is uniquely addictive. One of the things about it, I remember when I got elected to the Honor Council for my senior year, the headmaster called me into his office and said, "We would like to elect you to the Honor Council, but it is known in the community that you use tobacco. Will you quit?" And I said, "Yes." Little did I know that the 6-month depression I had after that was because of that. I thought there was something wrong with me. I didn't know why I was having trouble concentrating in school, and this is what's so unfair about nicotine. It actually really does help you concentrate. Nicotine has a unique way for the adolescent brain to learn. So when an adolescent brain, anybody I know where I feel like in this community you will appreciate when a young person inhales nicotine, it's the second fastest way to get a drug in your body, and Juul is designed to deliver nicotine exactly the same way as a cigarette does. And there are 1 billion of those smokers in the world. So going back, okay, so if I use nicotine as a young person, then there's a gene that's released called the FOSB gene. You may or may not care about that, except it's the most critical gene associated with learning and memory. So not only does it cause me to remember the experience of the dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins that are released, it actually makes talking to you better. And it makes me remember all of you in this evening. So it creates one of your students, one of the 9th graders said, "It's kind of like a bookmark, isn't it?" I was like, "It's exactly like a bookmark." And it's a bookmark that doesn't really go away. So the teenage brain can learn nicotine really quickly. And going back to the mental health, why is that? Like, nicotine withdrawal can look like irritability. It can take a while for the dopamine and serotonin system to start working on its own again, because it's already learned a false way and a quick and an easy and a tasty way, frankly, to deliver that, and an easy to hide way to deliver that nicotine. So being on the lookout as a parent for mood changes, that's definitely a teenage boy thing in general, but something that maybe seems a little bit more off. So last but not least, the majority of Loyola boys would be comfortable talking to their parents about substance use, and that's wonderful, but 43% not so comfortable. So how can we as parents encourage them and open up the door to that particular conversation? So instead of saying, "Son, do your friends use drugs?" Maybe something comes on the news about the opioid epidemic or about marijuana being legalized, or you drive by a sign that's a marijuana delivery, and you can just ask them what they think about that. Maybe tell them a little bit of something of a personal story, because if you start telling a story, that kid's going to turn away from the passenger door and listen to you. Because that's the stuff that resonates with them. That's one of the things when we share our stories with them that brings them into the conversation. That's what they always say about what they like about FCD, is that we come from experience and we talk about different stories. So know when stress is high, this is when they might be more likely to want to relieve it, whether it's with playing Fortnite or other video games. But we want to also be on the lookout with substance use. And don't, please keep listening. If your son brings up something at the dinner table, or your daughter, if you have daughters at home, my colleague always says, take a huge bite of whatever's in front of you and just listen. Just start chewing. They do listen to you. They do not want to let you down, and your role is a lot more important than you think. In most surveys that we give schools, the number one person that influences the choices they make around alcohol and other substances is themselves when they're in 11th and 12th grade and their parents when they're in 9th and 10th grade. Those are flipped. So it's either themselves or their parents. Their peers' influence is usually below 5%. So you do matter, and it's been wonderful to get to work with you. Have a great night.
Thank you, Will. Our next speaker, Dr. Margie Dominguez, is a clinical psychologist in private practice on the West Side for the past 19 years. Dr. Dominguez received her doctorate from the University of Denver's Child Clinical Psychology program and completed an internship and postdoctoral fellowship at UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute. Dr. Dominguez works with children, adolescents, and adults and treats a range of issues, including anxiety disorders, depression, stress management, and social relationship issues. Dr. Dominguez has also specialized experience in more severe stressors such as trauma and divorce. Dr. Dominguez.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. So my part of the presentation is to talk a little bit about how you as parents can differentiate, some of the previous speakers talked about the high stress levels. How do you know what's stress versus anxiety? How do you know what's normal teen moodiness or angst from something that's more serious, more of a depressive disorder? So that's the stuff I'm going to talk a little bit about. Let me say, for most teenagers that I work with, a common refrain that I hear is that everything counts. So the pressure that some of the kids talked about at the beginning tonight, that's very significant. Even if they struggled in elementary or middle school, they look back on those times fondly because they realize all that stuff is kind of water under the bridge. But now that they're in high school, everything counts. They have to get good grades. They have to do well in all these tests. They have to do 100 extracurricular activities and be leaders of everything. Not everybody can be the president of every club or captain of every team, but they feel this pressure that that's what it takes. So that's very common. In and of itself, not necessarily a problem, just helping them with stress management, which I'll talk a little bit more about. To give you an example of something that looks more of concern is when that kind of thinking gets extreme. So I worked with one young man at the beginning of his junior year of high school, and he was explaining to me that he was having literal panic attacks because he didn't know what major he wanted to have in college. And if he didn't have the right major, then he didn't know what college to go to. And if he didn't go to the right college, then he wouldn't be meeting the right people to make those kind of professional networking connections that he would make for whatever job he would eventually have. So if he didn't meet the right connections, he wouldn't get the right job. And if he didn't get the right job, then he wasn't going to be able to have the life that he envisioned for his family in the future. And so everything mattered today on this decision, and if he couldn't figure it out right now, he was doomed. And this is a student who was a straight A student, was president of lots of things, was on sports. He was going to have no problem probably getting into multiple schools. This is a boy who needed therapy and actually medication to get the panic disorder under control. So one thing to think about that we cannot look at to differentiate anxiety and depression is grades. It's sometimes the case that grades slip. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but many of the kids I see are very high achieving. Their grades are great, but they have a tremendous sense of pressure to keep them perfect. And also, a lot of high achieving students are very perfectionistic, so any mistake feels like a failure. So they're very driven and easily upset, and so we can't just look at the grades to say, well, if they're getting good grades, everything's probably fine. So if we can't look at that specifically, what do we look at? So I'm going to talk a little bit about anxiety first. A lot of people use stress and anxiety, those labels kind of interchangeably, and it makes some sense to do that because they are often experienced similarly in the body. We get headaches, we get stomach aches, we might have shortness of breath. heart palpitations, things like that. One way to maybe think about a difference that we can help kids start to understand is stress is more often something that's a specific kind of thing, usually an external stressor of some sort of test, a breakup, a job application, an interview, a fight, something like that. And that when the issue is resolved, the feelings kind of get better. So anxiety, on the other hand, is something that becomes more generalized, more pervasive, and in contrast to stress, which is about a thing, anxiety starts to be about anxiety. So to give you an example, I might be stressed about a difficult test I had in a hard class this week. If I take the test, a little bit of stress is a good thing. That's what helps me study. That's what gives me the like, ooh, I gotta get on this so that I can do okay. However, anxiety looks more like, ooh, I've got this big test on Friday in this really hard class. When I have a hard test, my brain freezes and I'm not going to be able to think, and I'm not going to be able to take this test, and if I don't do well, I'm going to fail. And if I fail this class, then I'm going to not get into school, and it just starts to cascade. At the extreme end, that can start to look like panic attacks. And a lot of people will sort of use that term loosely. When I talk about panic attacks, we're talking about a discrete period of very intense physiological symptoms. The boy I mentioned earlier, he would actually vomit in his panic attacks. So it's not, those don't last for hours or days. Anxiety can last for hours or days, but a panic attack is more of a discrete episode where you can have very rapid heart rate, trouble breathing, feel like you can't go anywhere. People wind up in the emergency room because they think they're having heart attacks. It's that level of anxiety. Both anxiety and depression have what we call cognitive distortions, so that cascading negative thoughts that I was describing can happen with both of those. Lots of negative thoughts like, I'm a failure, nothing will ever work out for me, those kinds of things. And those lead to avoidance. So another very common thing that we see with anxiety, and this is true of all the different anxiety disorders, is we tend to avoid the thing that makes us anxious, and that can become very problematic. Sometimes, I use this example with the kids a lot. If I'm afraid of snakes, okay, I can avoid snakes. That doesn't really affect my life too much. I can skip the snake house at the zoo. I don't usually run into snakes day to day, so it's not a problem. If I'm afraid to drive on the freeway, and I'm an adult living in Los Angeles, that's hard. It's hard to get around, so that's going to impact my functioning. If I'm afraid to get up in front of the class and give a presentation, so I stay home that day and never learn to do that, that's interfering with my functioning. So helping kids sort of differentiate the level of some of the things and understand the connection between anxiety and avoidance. Avoidance actually reinforces the anxiety. So another common one that we see with kids is school refusal, and well-meaning parents will respond with things like, well, they're really upset today, if I just let them stay home and take it easy and have a break, then they'll feel renewed and energized and ready to go back to school tomorrow. Occasionally that does work. More often than not, though, what we've done is reinforced staying home, and the longer that goes, the harder it gets to go back. I should pause and say, I think we're going to do some questions at the end, so I'm kind of zipping through this, but I think they are building in some time for questions later. Let me switch gears and talk a little bit about depression now. So, how do we tell typical teenage moodiness or angst from something that's more of a depression? And I'll disclaim this part with many of the things I'm about to list. Most teenagers do it at some point or another, so don't be alarmed. That's kind of the point of this. We know that depression is one of the most common mental illnesses in adolescents. About 11% of teens at some point will meet criteria for a depressive disorder of some kind. But only about 1 in 5 will get the intervention that they need. So it's underdiagnosed and undertreated. Some of the symptoms are depression, depressed mood, not just fleeting sadness, but a depression or a sadness that persists over most of the day, more days than not. Loss of interest in usual activities, or a sense that they're not having as much fun as they ordinarily would, so they might start withdrawing from things that they would normally like to do. In kids and teens, depression is not going to probably look like the classic image that many of us have of like the adult who stays in bed all day and can't get up. Kids will get up because their parents are driving them everywhere and they have to go to school, but they'll kind of drag through the day, being low energy, unmotivated, and also for kids and teens, it may not look like sadness. It can come out as irritability, argumentativeness, grouchy, bad mood swings. Again, caveat, I know they all look like that sometimes. And the feelings of worthlessness, guilt, low self-esteem we talked about already. You might see changes in appetite or sleep, so either too much or too little of either of those. Okay. So, given all those things can happen, sometimes how do you know when it's a problem? We're going to look at the intensity and the duration of the symptoms. Is it a fleeting thing, like we said earlier, that once the stressor's resolved, they sort of are over it, they have a fight with a friend, a couple days go by, they kind of bounce back in their usual self? Or is it the case that they're just sad and it just kind of seems to drag on for days or weeks, or highly anxious and it just keeps persisting? The other thing that happens with anxiety is it can travel. So this thing gets better, and then they're on to the next thing that they're anxious about. It never really seems to resolve. They just have a new thing each time. We're going to look at the context. If they're just grouchy and irritable with you at home, they don't want to do their chores, or they don't feel like doing their homework all the time, but they go to school and they're the dream student, and they're out with their friends, and they're on their teams, and it's all good, don't worry about that. That's normal. I worry about the kid who doesn't want to go out with his friends anymore on the weekend, doesn't really want to go to practice, maybe starts not feeling good and wanting to stay home from school, also sad and grouchy and moody with you at home. So again, we're going to look at if it's something more serious that's probably happening across these different contexts, and looking at how disruptive is it to their functioning. If you start to see some of these things, what are some things that you as parents can do? Stress management strategies are really helpful to teach kids, and also for you to do for yourselves. Some of the pressure that they're talking about as parents, like we're always, have you done this? Have you done that? Is this okay? How's that going? And that kind of hovering, somebody mentioned, adds to anxiety. So us learning to regulate our own stress and anxiety, and then teaching them strategies that we can model it for them. Hey, I'm kind of worried, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go take a walk, I'll come back, we can talk about this so you can demonstrate what you're trying to teach them. You can use alternative methods. So acupuncture can be really a helpful alternative treatment for anxiety especially. Homeopathic remedies that are out there. It's important to consult with the doctor about that too, because some homeopathic things can interact with other medications. Importance of sleep. They need to sleep. I know they biologically they're up late, they want to sleep late. It's sort of teaching them about taking care of themselves, eating enough, sleeping enough, getting exercise, physical exercise. Physiologically in the body is cardiovascular exercise counters depression and anxiety in our body. So having them try to do more things, even if they don't feel like it. Sometimes it's the case if you just get out and start doing something, if you can get over the hump of going, then you start to feel better, at least that you went and did it. Even if you didn't have that great of time, you can build up, and it's the sort of opposite of the avoidance reaction I was talking about earlier. I use a lot of mindfulness strategies, and I know here at Loyola they're using mindfulness in some of the program here. So teaching them to be aware of their thoughts and be aware of their feelings. When we can get a sense of what's going on for us internally, it gives us a little bit of a space where we can observe it, and then we can make a choice how we want to respond, rather than just having an automatic reaction. And sometimes I have teen boys and men who are grown-ups who will say, oh, that's kind of woo-woo, I can't meditate, I'm not into yoga. And I'll talk to my teen boys especially about how they're using these programs in the military, they're using them with first responders. It's kind of a tough thing to do those jobs, and that these are strategies that these really tough people use to help them do those things. If you're concerned, obviously you can talk to your school counselor, and they can also help give you a sense of like, oh no, that seems kind of typical, or yeah, we agree, that's maybe cause for concern, especially if they're beginning to self-medicate with drugs or alcohol, that they might need some extra support, as might you. And then obviously therapists like me, lots of us out here in California, and as a last resort, most parents want it to be a last resort, but sometimes there is a role for psychotropic medication to cushion anxiety. There's a lot of research that shows the best treatment is some combination of therapy and medication when you've got more severe symptoms. Sometimes outpatient therapy is not enough, and I know the next speaker is going to talk a little bit more about a program that they do here for kids when their symptoms are more severe. So there's a lot of self-injurious behavior going on, like cutting or other self-injurious behavior. Kids who might have suicidal ideation or attempts. I work with kids who engage in cutting or like kind of low levels of that, but sometimes it's at a very severe level and they really need a more intense program. If there's high levels of substance abuse, not just experimentation with alcohol or marijuana, because that's kind of typical for teens, but if they're really heading into more of an abuse scenario or addiction, they might need a higher level of care. And if their symptoms are so severe that you can't get them to outpatient therapy, so either they're unable or unwilling to go, and you're seeing all of these problems in these various contexts that I've been talking about, then you're going to probably look into a more intense kind of treatment program. So I think on to the next speaker who will talk more about that.
Thank you, Dr. Dominguez. Our next speaker, Frederick Schulen. Frederick is the CEO and partner at Insight Treatment Programs. He grew up in Denmark and launched a company providing prescriptive medication to Danish patients. He sold that company, relocated to Los Angeles, and married his wife, Carolyn. After working at great treatment program facilities like Bridges to Recovery, Westside, and Evolve Treatment, he found his passion for working with teens and became a partner at Insight Treatment Programs, who's been supporting teens and their families for over 20 years in Los Angeles. And he is getting set up here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I really want to thank the school for setting this up, and thank you guys for showing up, because we go out to a lot of schools to kind of talk about mental health among teens, and it can be very hard to engage in these conversations. And just by you guys showing up tonight and the school setting this up, that's really unique. So thank you very much. I have been invited out here today to talk a little bit about the higher levels of care. So as Dr. Dominguez talked about, she represents what's called OP, or outpatient setting, and sometimes the kids need a higher level of care. So we're going to talk about a little bit about that. And I'm also going to try to describe to you guys when that is needed, when that level of care will be needed, when it's not enough to just see a therapist every week or every 2 weeks. So let's start with different levels of care. So typically we talk about the hospital as the highest level of care. When a teenager has overdosed or are struggling with self-harm, maybe trying to commit suicide, typically the parent, they will go to the hospital, to the ER. Parents will be able to call 911. They will come out, they'll go to the ER, the police will assess the situation, and the kids will end up at a psychiatric ward somewhere in town. Unfortunately, often these psychiatric hospitals are fully booked, so the kids sometimes end up pretty far away from their home. But that's the highest level of care. That's not what we really consider treatment, that's just stabilization. The kids will stay there for 4 to 10 days at the most, and then they'll be discharged to a lower level of care. Typically, that level of care would be a residential treatment facility where the kids will go and they will live there for a little period of time. Typically 30 to 45 days is what the kids do in residential programs. They will get a lot of great therapy there, but it's a relatively short amount of time. The step down from there would be what's called intensive outpatient program. That's what I represent. That's what we're doing in our treatment program. And it's typically it is an after-school program where the kids will come in after school and do a lot of treatment. And then the last level of care, of course, is the outpatient. In an IOP program, the kids will typically come 3 to 4 days a week after school. So in our program, they show up at 4 o'clock, and then they do treatment from 4 until 7 on Mondays through Thursday. 1 day a week is the big family night, where treatment takes place from 5 o'clock until 9 o'clock at night. And that's a very, very, very important part of the program, because at this level of care, the parents are very involved. The kids are obviously living at home, and as we've heard before, there is always something going on in the family. Whatever is going on with the teens is never just something that's related to them. So this level of care, it's very important to get the whole family involved and get parents involved in the actual treatment. It's typically 9 to 12 months, and it's typically paid by insurance. So I would like to explain a little bit about the story that we typically see with the kids that come into our program. The kids will typically experience something when they're very young. As Dr. Dominguez talked about, the depression and anxiety is very common. Most kids that are at this level of care have experienced that when they're 8, 9, 10 years old, something comes up in their emotional world. Something happens that makes their emotional very difficult. Many kids have been diagnosed with ADHD or anxiety. Some kids have experienced some sort of trauma. Mom and dad had a divorce, dad had to move out of state, or mom had cancer. Something comes up in their emotional world that makes it very difficult to be them. When a kid is 8 or 9 years old or 10 years old, they don't know what the heck this feeling of anxiety is. Yes, they might go to a therapist. Yes, they might take medication. Yes, they might be labeled with having anxiety or ADHD, but they don't really understand it. And they wake up every morning with this feeling of something. And for, unfortunately, a lot of kids, the only way to get around that, or the only way to continue to get good grades and do well and live up to, the expectations in society and be a good kid, is to shut down that emotional world. So they simply disconnect from their emotional world to be able to just get by. So typically what we see is that the kids will continue to do okay. They will come home from school and mom will ask, "So how was school today?" "It was fine, Mom, it's okay." But reality is that school was not fine. It was not fun at all. It was hard, and they were sitting on these emotions. The other thing could be about, how are you doing? How's your day? Are you happy? "Yes, I'm happy, Mom." They're not happy. It's hard to be them every single day, one way or another. So the kids will typically start lying a lot about their emotional world. And they will start manipulating a little bit to avoid certain things. They'll start isolating over time. But typically we see from the age of, let's say, 8 or 9 until 13, 14, 15, everything seems okay. They might see a therapist, they might take medication, but it doesn't really help. It doesn't really get them anywhere. They don't really open up. They tell the therapist whatever they want to tell, open up a little bit, they open up a little bit to mom and dad, but they don't get it all out. So then, when they turn 14, 15, or 16, we typically see now they start acting out. So now the kids will, sorry? Okay, sorry. So the kids will now start acting out. And some kids will act out by using drugs. Now they'll start using marijuana as a coping mechanism. They'll start using to numb themselves out. They'll be drunk to numb themselves out and forget about some other things. They will smoke weed to reduce their anxiety and get through life. They will be very angry. They'll be irritated. They will start getting in trouble at home. Usually a lot of crisis is being created at home. Start arguing with mom and dad about rules and start breaking rules. Some kids will have very risky behaviors. Start showing signs that they don't care. They don't want to dress nice, they don't care if they do well in school, their grades will start dropping. Other kids will use self-harm as a mechanism, right? So they will start isolating, maybe with a couple of other friends that are doing the same, and they will start harming themselves, cutting themselves, having suicidal thoughts. So that's typically the way that they're acting out. And it's typically not just one way. There's usually several things that starts falling apart at that point in time. So a lot of parents are saying, hey, isn't there just one thing for it? Like, what should I watch out for? Well, typically I say, look out for this history. Right? See the patterns. It's not just because, oh, he or she got high over the weekend and maybe had to go to the ER because they took too much, or drank too much. That's not necessarily the thing. It's about this history. And if this history is there, there's a very good chance that the kids are getting to a point where they kind of give up. They kind of say to themselves, you know what, this doesn't matter anymore. I've tried it all. I've been to a therapist, I've taken medication, I've felt this way as long as I can remember. And I've tried all sorts of things, and nothing changes. So when this level of care is needed, it's very often because the kids are getting to that point where they just give up. Oh, sorry, I forgot. So at that point in time, the kids need to be mixed in with kids who have felt the same emotional pain. Typically at that point in time, there's a lot of crisis at home in the family, and it's very difficult to set boundaries, it's very difficult to find out what's up and down, to be honest. But the point is the kids need to feel that there's finally somebody that understands them. As I said, they've often seen a therapist or a psychiatrist and that hasn't helped. They don't feel understood. So the big difference between an IOP setting or a residential setting versus an outpatient setting is that here the kids are being forced into being part of a community where there's other kids who have felt the same emotional pain as they have, that they can relate to in a different way than just sitting down and talking to somebody for an hour or two. So in an IOP program or in a good treatment program, you'll see that there's a lot of emphasis and a lot of focus being put in to kind of push these kids to be together, socialize, start respecting each other for who they are and the music they listen to and all this stuff, but then starting sharing some of all this emotional stuff that's going on. Because that's really where they can feel understood, is when there's other kids who can say, oh, are you feeling angry that way? Yeah, so do I. Right? So often the kids have acted out in many different ways in a treatment program. So you'll see that some have been using self-harm, some have been using sex, some have been using drugs. They've acted out and used different coping skills, unhealthy coping skills, so to say. But what they all have in common is these many years of emotional pain. And that's what the kids need to connect around. The other part about treatment is that we heard before how parents have a huge influence. And you really do. Whether they say yes or no to that, you really do have a big influence on the kids. But unfortunately, often parents have got their own stuff. You guys have been dealing with your own stuff, anxiety or depression over the years. And it's very important in these situations that the parents also get some support. Because everything you guys are going through is, all that energy reflects down to the kids. So, therefore, it's important in these cases that parents take responsibility and kind of say, hey, you know what, honey? I love you, and I care for you, and I'm scared what can happen if we don't go out here and get some help. But our family needs some help. And we need to do this together. Because mom and dad are struggling setting boundaries right now. Mom and dad are struggling with our own stuff, and we all need some help as a family. To that I can say, I often meet parents who kind of come in and go, hey, my kid, all of this stuff is going on. He needs treatment, he needs some help. Yes, that's true, but when it's presented that way, the kids are gonna go, no way. I've had enough. I've done my fair share. Nothing is gonna change. I don't believe in this. And they don't wanna be part of it. Whereas when parents kind of say, honey, we need this as a family. Let's try and get this done. Let's get to a better place as a family. We understand us as parents, we've had our things, and we need to deal with it. Then it kind of becomes a family thing. And the kids have much, much easier to kind of accept it and do something. Because that's one of the biggest hurdles is, of course, that the kids at this point in time typically are giving up and they just want to isolate at home. Nobody should interfere in their life. They're not worth anything. They're not worth your attention. Their self-esteem is at a very low point. Often when parents say to the kids, but I love you. I really love you, and you're great the way you are. The kids are thinking in their head, gee, if mom just knew or dad just knew all the stuff that goes on inside of my head, all the stuff that goes on in here, or all the small lies I've been telling about how good I feel or how great this is or how good I am in school or how great I am with my friends. If they just knew the truth, they would never say that. Nobody can love me. That's the unfortunate truth often. So, let's see what time it is, I think. Time is going fast, so let's not do that one. I just want to say again, if any of you guys have some questions, you're welcome to come up to me tonight. I'll stay around for a little bit. Come and ask any questions you guys want to. But thank you very much for showing up tonight.
Thank you, Frederick. Our next speaker, I think, would be particularly important for all of you. Mr. Dennis Frere, he's a parent of 4 Loyola alumni. God bless him, he's the father of 5 kids. 4 of them, like I mentioned, graduated from Loyola, but he wanted to share with you his kind of personal perspective of his experience with Loyola High School. Thank you.
Good evening. As Paul said, I'm Dennis Frere, an alumni parent. A couple of weeks ago, on the way to a Dodger game, I got an email from Dean Danarelli asking if I could say a few brief words tonight. As I was slowly digesting and absorbing his request over the next few days, Dan called and asked if I received the email. That's what you do. Dean. I said yes, and I was still undecided and quite frankly, a little uncomfortable with the overall emotional subject matter. And I would get back to him soon. To say that this is an uncomfortable space for me would be an understatement. I dislike public speaking, so I will keep my thoughts brief. And I hate discussing my family problems and issues publicly. However, Loyola was there for me and my family in our time of need, and we truly needed help. Hence, this is why I'm here tonight. Drugs and teenagers are a big problem. I'm not a professional in this field. I'm no expert. Just a regular, normal parent who wants what all parents want: health, happiness, and success for our children. I consider myself very lucky. I've been blessed to have 4 sons attend Loyola and 1 daughter attend Marymount High School, 4 college grads and 1 halfway through. I think of Loyola as a 40-year play, not a 4-year high school. I'm very proud to be a Cub parent. Honestly, as I was preparing a few notes, I was a little unclear as to what to say tonight. Because there is no secret sauce to parenting. It's challenging and hard work. There is no one-size-fits-all program or manual. And I have no monster words or wisdom for you. When your kid is doing drugs and self-medicating, it's a very long and scary day. When you lose control over your son and can't connect anymore, it's very painful. When your teenager won't listen to you, it's terrifying. This was the situation I found our family in a few years ago when one of my sons was in his first semester of his junior year. Tension and problems were mounting at home on how to cope and deal with all this new stuff. My wife was researching out of town schools and rehab centers to send our son. We were in disagreement and challenged on what to do next. Luckily, we had built a solid foundation and relationship with the Loyola administration, and I went in to discuss what was happening at home and explain our situation. Communication was critical. Ultimately, we agreed, with Loyola's help and blessing, to pull him from his second semester and enroll him into a local rehab that he went to during the day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and come home at night. Loyola was extremely supportive of our decision. Rehab was brutal, but he was getting the help he needed. It was a very challenging time for our family, as our son was very upset at us and didn't believe he had a problem. Part of rehab involved family counseling, and it was difficult for everyone. Our son was now mixed in with other kids whom he and we both did not see as his peers. It was a wake-up call. We witnessed and heard about a lot of heavy problems. Ultimately, our son took online classes that semester, went to summer school, and got extra tutoring. He successfully returned to Loyola for his senior year with conditions of being drug tested and seeing a therapist. We were grateful for Loyola for allowing us the space to get the help our family needed. Our son is doing great now, and as a matter of fact, he's agreed to be drug tested monthly through his college years. We pay him a small, motivating incentive, a carrot, for this, but it has allowed him an excuse to say no to drugs in the face of peer pressure. To conclude, as I said earlier, and I'll say it again, communication was critical, especially when things are happening. Sometimes we want to ignore certain warning signs or sweep things that are uncomfortable under the rug. But sometimes it's also better to confront certain issues while our kids are still living at home and maybe under the age of 18. Thank you for being here for your Cubs. We don't want our kids to be shortchanged or make any life-altering mistakes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dennis, for your courage and for sharing that very personal story. I know that we appreciate that and acknowledge how difficult that was for you, but thank you. And it speaks directly to why we're here tonight. So I just want to put a couple things up, and I'll be as brief as I can be about this. So, on Monday morning of this week, I took a moment to meet with my consigliere team, I call them. This is a group of clandestine seniors who I meet with every now and then. We just talk about what's going on at school. We just discuss the culture of things so I can get a beat on the school, and it's helpful for them, it's helpful for me. They're pretty honest with me, and to be completely honest, we have a lot of opportunities in the dean's office and as counselors and to have students be very candid with us about what they're experiencing, what they're feeling. So I wanted to use that as the source for some of the comments to finish up tonight, and then also to give you something to go home with this evening. I mean, when we were planning for this and we appreciate you being here, one of the things we thought was, well, what's the takeaway? What are they going to go home with? So there's some things that I hope that you can get out of this that you haven't already in terms of going home. So I said, it's an old Latin term, ad fontes, you go to the sources, you go to the fountains of information, and that's our students. One of the things that one of the students said was, well, I actually said to them, what would you want to hear if you were a parent of yourself coming to an evening about mental health, drugs and alcohol, things like that? And they said, well, parents are upset about all of it. One of the kids said, my mom's always saying that I don't like all of it. I don't like what's happening. I don't like all the vaping. I don't like all the partying. And they said, I'm not sure if parents know today what it is. And so I tried to talk to them about that. Let's describe that. So, what is it? Well, in their own words, as we talked about, this is a little bit philosophical, so I'll be quick through this one. It's self-deception. Both students and parents are guilty of this. For parents, it's the idea that it's not my son. They will tell you that it may well be your son. They'll tell me that, at least. And for students, it's a lack of self-awareness in their beliefs, maybe their intelligence or lying to themselves, abilities, self-control, or willpower. And we point the finger very easily at everybody else. Or we project onto others. And so they talked about how difficult it is to really have a sense of who they are, what they want, and balancing that against the standards or expectations of their parents, of their school, of their teammates, of their coaches, of their friends. So we got into that a little bit more, and we talked about things like this. So I just thought it would be good for you to have some pictures of things. What might you want to be looking out for? There's a few things here. Obviously, we've heard about Jewel, but the number of students who raised their hands and said that they know someone who's addicted to nicotine and cannot stop and cannot get through the day without it, almost universally their hands go up. It's a $300 billion company with a 70% market share in the e-cigarette market. It is marketed directly to children in It is multi-flavored, it is easily accessible, and it is very discreet. I just have a stockpile of these in my office. This is the Soren. This looks more like sort of pod juice. It's refillable. You pour juice inside of it. You buy the juice online. You keep the bottom part, which is the device, and you refill that. It's a bit harsher than Juul, and like I said as well, it's discreet and sleek and easily hidden. And then we have the marijuana, which is also very easily accessible. And the students will tell you, oh, it's legal. Well, it's not legal for anyone to smoke any of these devices, anything, nicotine or marijuana or CBD oil, if you're under the age of 21. The concentration of THC inside of these containers is extremely high, or can be extremely high. There are different levels of strength. And like I said before, it's very discreet. It has almost no smell. We always talk about how difficult it would have been 20, 30 years ago to get high at school. Would have been impossible if you were to smoke marijuana. It smelled, you had to put fire inside of a joint or a bowl of some kind, right? So it would have been very nearly impossible to do. And yet here, in this day and age, it is possible to very discreetly in their bedrooms before dinner build an appetite. And they will say that. That's part of the routine. It's part of the maintenance plan. By the way, these are all interchangeable too, so if you had a device, not all interchangeable, but the lids or the delivery system can be interchanged into other devices. So all you have to do is go and re-buy not a charger, but you have to buy the actual pod itself that has the liquid THC, and you can put it in a number of different devices. The other thing that they talk about is the prevalence of Xanax, Xanibars, Xans, and fentanyl. That is not something that I think students are necessarily gravitating towards because they want to, but it's something that is prevalent in the popular culture right now. And I put the names of two rappers who are recently deceased from overdoses on these drugs, who they talk about as being in the popular vernacular. And the students, there's a rapper named Lil Xan who just raps about Xanax. So it's very common for them to have this influence in their popular culture, in their music. And this is the one that I truly do worry about when I talk about its deadly effects, the Xanax. And so I caution you about this one in particular when it comes to that. And I'll skip this link here, but I'll go to this one that I think is relevant. Just to give you an idea of how easy it all is. The name says it, ease. And it's marijuana delivered to you in your home or at your place of work. And if you're telling me that they're not marketing to children or young people, then explain to me the golden pear gummies and the cherry lime leaf gummies, okay, that you see that are so easily accessible to the edibles that students say that they are able to obtain on some level, that some people are able to get. Getting into the mental health aspect of it, the twin issue of this. Stress and anxiety are real. They talk directly about the pressures of college, how much more difficult it is to get into college today than it was for you or for I. How challenging it is in their current mindset when they're constantly being compared to others or other families or comparing themselves to others. We saw this statistic earlier about how much of that stress comes from internally inside themselves. And so that's something that they talk about a lot, and they are challenged by the idea that Parents, they say that they want me to be successful, but they don't put that pressure on me. I put enough pressure on myself, they say. So the pressure is internal a lot of times. And you've heard it many times tonight, but it's true. They don't want to let their parents down. They want to live up to the image of the ideal cub, whatever that means for their parents. And they balance that against the social media, wanting to be heard and noticed for who they are, the fear of missing out, the feelings of, am I enough? I see all these kids doing all these cool things. We heard it in the letter that was written by the student earlier tonight. The pressures of, should I be doing that? Is this what I'm supposed to be when I see this Instagram photo? But they're just moments, they're just snapshots. They also mention their friends a lot, and they talk about the idea of who your friend group really kind of does define you. They don't say that they feel peer pressure. They really don't. If they're at a party and they want to not partake in alcohol or drugs, they don't feel as though they have that 1980s bully mentality, like try this, do it. That's not what they feel, but their friend groups and who they choose to be around do tell you a little something about who they are. And so they said, show me your friends, I'll show you your future kind of mentality. They also said to be mindful of what's in your own medicine cabinets. Sometimes the first dose of something is something that they get from their parents. The balance between being micromanaged and being assisted is something that is a delicate one that I think we've talked about tonight. The hovering parent versus the helpful parent, and what does it take to be helpful. And then as we heard earlier from Ben, the idea of being incentivized. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what you like about us. When it comes to mental health, they talk a lot about how there is no more stigma about it. They're much more comfortable talking about depression and anxiety. I find, and the counselors find, that it is amazing how easily students are able to articulate how they're feeling, much more so than their dad's generations. And they're able to say that they're feeling anxiety. They're able to name it, identify it, define it, talk about depression in ways that are really impressive, actually. Also, the stigma of marijuana and self-medication has gone away. And so the idea of relieving stress through some self-medication is not as stigmatized as it was in generations prior. And Loyola has a very proactive stance on this. We, as Dr. Jordan mentioned earlier, the uptick in students who have asked for help or who have needed help has been noticeable. But like we see, it's a trend across the nation. The universities are dealing with it too. And so how are we going to address it as a school community and be a resource for you as parents in a way that is productive? And so that's what this really is about. So what can Loyola do? Well, I have some things up here that are obvious. The counseling department is a holistic counseling department. They're not just about academics. They are also here to help personal growth, cure personalities. We have speakers that come on campus. The General Meeting of Students with Learning Differences has speakers come on campus about time management, about coping mechanisms that are healthy. We have FCD come on campus. We have organic conversations with students. We have a mental health awareness club. We have a mindfulness club. All of these things are really good. And we trust in our Ignatian charism. We trust in our mission. This is part of what we do and what we've always done. But to be more specific, if there is more help needed, and what I think Mr. Frere was getting at ultimately, is that we can only help you as a school, we at Loyola can only help parents if we know about it. And so there are two things that I'm going to talk about tonight that are directly related to that communication that is crucial. We have had in place for at least 5 years now what's called the care management team. Now, I don't want to oversell this because not everything is a care management team issue, okay? A care management team is something where myself, the counselor, the assistant principal for academics, Father Barber, and the parents and students get together in a room and talk about the issue that's going on. It might be a student's concussion. It might be a kid who just got a cancer diagnosis. It might be someone who's going to miss school for a long time because of a physical injury or a surgery. It also might be a kid who's suffering from depression and has a clinical diagnosis. It also might be a kid who has an issue with drugs or alcohol and is getting out in front of it. And so what happens in this situation is the parent contacts either me or the counselor, most likely the counselor. The idea of calling the dean and saying, I think my kid might be going to school high is probably not the best idea. But talking to your counselor, your son's counselor about the issue, and then at a certain point, it may rise to a level where we need to get into a room and talk about it. And we have a host of different options, accommodations, loosening of the grip, conversations that we can have, and recommendations that we can make. I'm not saying that Loyola has a way to fix the issue necessarily, but we will work with the family to find out a way, the best way for you as a family, to fix it. Much like what Mr. Frere was talking about. And that communication, that transparency, that trust in the presumption of goodwill, that's what we talk about in Ignatian education. That we come from the presumption of goodwill. I am not here to try and get your son into trouble or disparage you as a family simply because I'm the dean. Our first and foremost responsibility is to care for our students. And if you're coming to us with that goal in mind, then we're going to sit down at the table with you and work through it with you. And that's what the care management team is designed to do, and that's kind of how it works. But like I said, not everything is going to go to that level. The other thing that we have adopted is what's called the Stop It app. Okay? The Stop It app is an app that you can download on your phone. It is a way for you to refer issues that you are concerned with about your son, about your family, about somebody else that you have concerns about their behavior. And it is anonymous. It doesn't have to be. And that is one way to refer an issue that you're concerned about to the counseling department. It actually bypasses the dean's office completely. It goes to Dr. Jordan. Dr. Jordan gets that referral, and as the head of counseling, he then farms that out to the counselor to address the issue. And sometimes it ends up being not a big deal, and sometimes it ends up being a situation in which the school, the counselor, is able to intervene in a way that makes a tremendously valuable difference. And we have seen that in real time. We have experienced that. And Dr. Jordan and I say often how proud we are about some of the things that no one will know about, but we take care of our kids in these situations. And so that's what I want to stress here at the end. Just be open to communicating, operate on the presumption of goodwill, and know that we as a school can only do so much. We will reach a point where we have to refer it out. But we will sit down at the table with you and work with the family and the student to make sure that we get it right. And hopefully we can be a resource to you in many ways, including this. I will send out a follow-up email to all parents with a link to tonight's presentation and also a link to some resources that would be helpful for you in the weeks and months to come. That might just be educational, informative. Others may be links to things that will help you as a family work through situations that you might be dealing with in your own lives. I really want to thank everyone for coming, and I think Mr. Kozakowski may have had some closing comments.
What I wanted to do is just thank the school administrators, Dan and Paul, for putting this together with our counseling department. I wanted to thank our students, Kevin and Ben, for their sharing. I wanted to thank the medical professionals that were here with us this evening. But I also especially wanted to thank you for coming out, for spending time with us. And I had a couple of my own takeaways. Dan said it so eloquently, but I just want to reinforce a couple of those points. I had heard a number of years ago FCD say something that it was more important for you to have 100 one-minute conversations with your son than to have one 100-minute conversation. So I encourage you, as our speakers did throughout the night, is to continue to talk to your sons. They may not show it, but they are listening to what you're saying. At various points throughout the evening, I was pretending that I was a parent of a freshman. And I was sitting here wondering, what is normal? What do I do? I wanted a roadmap, and it didn't look like I was getting a roadmap. But as Dan said at the end, you have our promise that we're going to partner with you on the road ahead. Last year in June, I had 4 seniors that were not present in graduation. 2 of them were in medical facilities, in rehab facilities, but all 4 of them had a path in which they earned the Loyola diploma. They had a path in which they were getting healthier. And you have our promise to walk with you for those 2 goals. And I like what Dennis said, in that there is no secret sauce, there's no magic bullet, there's no magic formula, there's no magic way to interpret that teenager's behavior. I wish it was easier, and it's not. Thank you so much for coming this evening. I know you've got maybe more questions than what you walked in with, but you have is our promise to walk with you. Thank you.